Hey there, amazing friends. I warmly invite you to join me on this exciting journey by subscribing to my channel, liking, commenting, and sharing my videos. Every like, comment, and share brings us closer together and fuels my passion to create more great content. Your support truly makes all the difference. Thank you for being the heart of this community. Loch Ness under the full moon, unraveling the secret echoes hiding in those murky waters. Night settles over the Scottish Highlands with an almost tangible hush, the air crisp and tasting faintly of peat. Loch Ness, a dark and brooding expanse of fresh water, stretching through the rolling landscape, lies beneath an immense moon that casts a pale glow onto the rippling surface. The silhouette of the surrounding hills stands in stark contrast, and pine forests line the loch's shore, black and impenetrable under the star-filled sky. For centuries, these waters have fueled speculation and myth, each tale suggesting that something massive and elusive dwells in the depths, something that surfaces rarely, if at all, tempting the adventurous to keep watch at all hours. During the daytime, groups of tourists and curious visitors often scan the horizon with cameras in hand, hoping for a glimpse of the storied Nessie. However, it is at night, particularly when the moon is full, that the loch's atmosphere changes from scenic to quietly unsettling. The lake's surface, dark as polished obsidian, seems to swallow the faint light, revealing only silver echoes where small waves lap the shore. It's easy to believe that deep below the reflection, something old and secret stirs, a presence as ancient as the highlands themselves. Legends about the Loch Ness Monster date back to medieval chronicles, describing an unidentified creature large enough to challenge even the most seasoned huntsman or fisherman. Over time, the monster has become a cultural phenomenon, an icon bridging cryptozoology, tourism, and scientific curiosity. Contemporary searches often rely on sonar sweeps, submersible drones, or high-resolution photography from vantage points along the loch's 23-mile length. The surface area is vast, its waters remarkably deep. Some spots approach nearly 1,000 feet. On top of that, the loch's composition of peat-laden waters results in limited visibility, so anything more than a few meters down is cloaked in gloom. For many, Nessie is just a local tall tale, a metaphor for the region's mystique. Yet others remain convinced that the monster is real, citing blurred photos, inexplicable sonar contacts, or personal anecdotes passed on in hushed tones over pints in the local pub. Skeptics retort that wave patterns, logs, or misidentified sturgeons can account for most sightings. But the question remains unresolved. What secrets truly lurk beneath the loch's dark veneer? While countless day trips and tourist boat tours claim vantage for spotting the famed cryptid, local folklore insists that the loch's mysteries grow most active when the moonlight strikes the water. Old Highland superstitions say that on certain nights, the boundaries between the mundane and the arcane weaken, and if one stands quiet along the shore, they may witness fleeting shapes or hear odd calls echo from below. The story goes that once every lunar cycle, near midnight, an echoing rumble vibrates from the depths, reverberating along the stony shoreline. Some believe it is the beast announcing its dominion. Others propose that underwater caverns amplify distant movements or subsurface waves. Either way, these secret echoes are rarely discussed in official circles, but are recounted by fishermen and longtime locals, each with subtle variations. Some claim it's a moaning sound that lasts but a few seconds. Others say it's a series of pulses, reminiscent of whale calls, but deeper and more ominous. A few dogged investigators spend night after night on vantage points with sensitive audio equipment, hoping to catch a repeat occurrence. They sometimes capture faint vibrations, though analyzing them yields inconclusive results, a puzzle piece that suggests unusual subaquatic acoustics. Among the dedicated watchers is a woman named Isla, a self-styled cryptid researcher who moved from the south to a cottage near Drumnadrocket specifically to study Loch Ness. An amateur by professional standards, but driven by unwavering enthusiasm, she has made it her mission to compile every local story about moonlit sightings, odd nocturnal rumbles, and unaccounted-for phenomena. She interviews older men who recall strange watery hums or glimpses of massive shapes crossing the loch's surface under the moonlight, hearing in their recollections a faint chorus of half-forgotten truths. Over countless evenings, she sets up camp along the stony beaches, armed with thermal imaging scopes, audio recorders, and a small boat if needed. Her notes bristle with references to archaic Gaelic songs that mention the shadow in the loch, rumored to be a guardian spirit or a leftover from primeval times. She also references scientific articles about seismic shifts that might produce sub-lake resonances, mindful that not all can be explained by cryptids. Yet she remains open to the possibility of a genuine unknown creature existing in that watery labyrinth. After all, Earth's oceans and deep lakes have repeatedly yielded unexpected discoveries. One crisp autumn evening, near the apex of the full moon, Isla and a small group of curious acquaintances gather by the shore. They've set up an impromptu watch station, a pair of acoustic hydrophones floating a short distance offshore, a set of night vision binoculars, and multiple high-sensitivity cameras. The group includes a skeptical marine biologist from Glasgow, a local historian with an interest in Celtic myth, and a friendly retired policeman who has lived by the loch all his life. They talk quietly, waiting for midnight. The surface of the loch is unusually still, and the moon's reflection cuts a bright path across the water. A hush lingers over the group, as though collectively they sense something might happen. The policeman, old Callum McRae, recounts how decades back he encountered a swirl in the water late at night that churned with surprising force, as though a large mass had passed below. He never saw any form, but the swirl had unsettled him so deeply he avoided nighttime fishing for years. The historian interjects that Gaelic lore includes references to water horses or kelpies that lure travelers into the depths. Some align these legends with the modern Nessie stories. The marine biologist, arms crossed, remains cautious but open-minded. Lake sturgeons, catfish, or eels could produce illusions, she suggests. Or maybe a large seal occasionally enters via the river Ness. Isla listens, keen on bridging myth and data. She feels an electric possibility in the air. Sometime after midnight, the group hears a faint stirring on the hydrophone feed, a low-frequency moan, not quite mechanical, not quite natural. The audio equipment registers a spike. They hush each other, ears perked. For about 10 seconds, a sequence of pulses resonates through the headphones, reminiscent of some unearthly language. The signals then fade abruptly. The group exchanges startled looks. Could it be just underwater echo or a fish vocalization? The marine biologist's expression changes from skepticism to enthrallment. She mutters about how these frequencies do not match typical fish calls or mechanical boat noise. They quickly attempt to triangulate the source, but the ephemeral nature of the pulses makes it difficult. Meanwhile, Callum stares across the moonlit surface. He swears he sees a slight crest of water, as if something large moved just beneath. He points. The group scrambles with binoculars, but the surface remains unbroken, blank except for subtle ripples. In the tension, everyone feels an undeniable sense that something in the loch responded to them or acknowledged their presence. Over the following weeks, Isla and her acquaintances replay the recordings, analyzing the waveforms. Various experts weigh in, many concluding that it's probably an unknown biological source or a quirk of underwater currents. But the pattern of pulses is eerily systematic, not random. Some come to believe the recordings represent a type of echolocating creature, perhaps an undiscovered variant of large freshwater cetaceans. Yet no recognized species should produce such resonances in a small, landlocked lake. Others evoke the idea that a large eel or amphibian might be behind it, though the specifics remain uncertain. The local historian, though lacking scientific credentials, merges the new data with old Gaelic references to songs of the watery guardian, fueling talk that the so-called monster might communicate through low-frequency calls. The policeman, half joking, wonders if the calls are a warning for intruders. Publicly revealing these bizarre recordings, however, stirs a new wave of tourists descending upon the loch, hoping for a sensational scoop. This ironically complicates research efforts, as more boat traffic and noise pollution disrupt the serenity of nighttime observation. In the meantime, a handful of nighttime sightings are reported. Tourists claim they glimpsed a serpentine silhouette crossing the loch's path in the moonlight, or felt the water swirl around their rowboat with inexplicable force. But photographic evidence remains typically blurred or ambiguous. The phenomenon, if real, remains elusive. Skeptics double down, calling it a mass delusion fueled by media hype. Still, a growing subset of cryptozoological enthusiasts and investigators believe that some hidden apex creature stirs in Loch Ness black waters, perhaps more active under the moon, for reasons unknown. Some propose it hunts at night or surfaces to breathe. A few postulate that the brightness of the full moon triggers a behavioral pattern akin to marine animals drawn by tidal shifts, though the loch's water is not tidal. The lack of final proof keeps the debate at a simmering standoff. Gradually, the lore around full moon sightings builds into an intriguing submyth, tales describing how the monster's presence intensifies under moonlight, possibly due to ancient energies bound to the highlands. Celtic tradition, after all, revered the moon's cyclical power. It's easy for imaginative minds to link these legends to the lake's rumored occupant. Some suggest a lineage from times before recorded history, a relict creature that might operate with primal instincts aligned to lunar cycles. The more mystical accounts speak of the monster as a semi-intelligent entity, one that might sense watchers or respond to certain energies in its environment. Those who favor purely biological explanations remain baffled, but not entirely dismissive. Large eels, sturgeons, or an unknown species might behave differently with changes in ambient light or tide illusions. That's the essence of cryptozoology, a delicate dance between folklore, anecdote, and the barest edges of plausible science. Behind the fascination, local businesses seize the opportunity. Tour boats offer moonlit cruises, promising a spooky, romantic vantage. Gift shops stock plush moonlit Nessie dolls with glow-in-the-dark fins. For the villagers, it's a double-edged sword. Tourism fosters income, but clogs the roads with curious onlookers, some trespassing onto private property in search of vantage points. Meanwhile, the more serious watchers, like Isla, lament that the rising commotion might scare away the very phenomenon they wish to observe. Indeed, the new wave of boat traffic at night introduces noise, reflecting bright lights across the water. The hush that once enveloped the loch under the moon shrinks under the chaos of commerce. One stormy evening, a dramatic incident re-energizes the speculation. A tourist boat carrying about a dozen enthusiasts sets out on a midnight monster tour. The weather forecast had called for mild drizzle, but a sudden gale whips up, turning the lake treacherous with whitecaps. The vessel is battered, losing engine power briefly, drifting near the center of the loch. In the swirl of panic, a couple of tourists claim to see a massive shape gliding under the water, perhaps drawn by the thrashing boat. They describe glimpses of a rough hump or ridged back, illuminated by lightning flashes. The captain also catches a fleeting silhouette, but cannot confirm its size or form with clarity. Terrified, They radio for rescue. Eventually, they limp back to shore with no casualties. But the story saturates social media. Monster appears in the midst of a storm, as though the elements and the cryptid conspired to remind humans of their insignificance. Of course, the event remains anecdotal. The presence of driving rain and panic likely shaped illusions, but for believers, it stands as fresh evidence that the lake's denizen emerges in times of chaos. Amid the swirl, local legends about doorways beneath the loch also gain traction. Some of these stories propose that the underwater caverns connect to hidden labyrinths, a leftover from glacial times, forming channels that lead into unimaginable depths. If the creature or creatures are real, the idea goes, they dwell in these labyrinths, occasionally surfacing. Some claim these doorways might also be metaphysical, forging a link to other realms under the moon's watch, tying Loch Ness to a broader tapestry of Celtic folklore about fae or spirits that roam the boundary between worlds. This merging of cryptozoology and esoteric tradition only intensifies the mystique. Skeptics might roll their eyes, but a subset of watchers commits to exploring sonar mapping of the loch's bed, trying to spot any large sublacustrine caves. The results show interesting pockets or shelf-like structures, but nothing conclusive. The loch keeps its secrets well. For Isla, who remains at the heart of this quest, the phenomenon transcends mere monster hunting. In her late-night watch sessions, she experiences fleeting moments of awe, standing by the water as the moon's reflection stretches across blackness, the chill wind stirring the pine trees. She's begun recording not just potential sightings, but also the intangible sense of being observed, as though the loch itself is half-sentient. She wonders if centuries of legend or the communal psychic energy have produced something tangible in the environment. The historian in her group shrugs it off as romantic fancy, while the marine biologist tries to steer the conversation to data. But in quiet confessions, many watchers admit they sense a presence under the full moon, something old and vaguely melancholic, neither purely malevolent nor benign. That intangible hush resonates with the region's age, as though the highlands keep watch over a creature older than memory. And thus the cyclical pattern continues. Nights of the full moon evoke watchful crowds, no definitive proof surfaces, but the local culture deepens its bond with the notion that Loch Ness holds a hidden occupant. Some nights produce fleeting anomalies, a swirl of water, an odd shape flickering on a camera's edge, or the weird pulses captured by hydrophones. Enough to keep hope alive, not enough to unravel the enigma. Meanwhile, more conventional researchers maintain that if a large unknown reptile or mammal existed in the lake, it would struggle to avoid detection forever. They point out the ecosystem might not sustain such a large predator in small numbers. They stress that illusions, group psychology, and hoaxes can explain the monster myth. Yet the hush under the moon remains intangible, a hush that compels open-mindedness about nature's capacity for surprise. Through countless retellings, the secret echoes in those murky waters have come to symbolize the intersection of myth and science. Tour guides recite the anecdote of how audio recorders captured pulses late at night, reminiscent of calls from a creature unclassified. The earliest recorded mention of these echoes is rumored to be in 7th century monastic texts, describing a droning beneath the waters at certain phases of the moon, driving beasts to howling on the shore. Modern analysis never pinned down their cause. Some suspect a geological phenomenon, like pockets of gas releasing from the lake bed combined with temperature shifts. Others are convinced it's evidence of a cryptid communicating in a frequency outside normal hearing. The tension between rational explanation and magical narrative forms the heartbeat of Loch Ness' continuing allure. In the end, the question lingers: does the Loch Ness Monster truly exist, And if so, what is it? And does the full moon accelerate or highlight its presence? Or is that simply the romantic lens of our imagination, layering cosmic significance onto an otherwise natural phenomenon? The deeper one delves, the more entangled the inquiry becomes. Possibly the answer is simpler. A large, elusive creature might occasionally surface at night, and moonlit reflection aids in sightings. Or perhaps no creature at all exists, and the swirl of illusions, wave patterns, and local tradition conjures sightings in the minds of watchers. Or maybe, just maybe, something far stranger is at play, something ancient and cunning that emerges only in the hush of moonlit nights, leaving behind fleeting echoes that defy scientific capture. Each viewpoint remains an interpretive lens on a puzzle that has endured centuries. Regardless, Loch Ness stands as testament to humanity's enduring fascination with the unknown. Under the full moon, those murky waters hold an undeniable atmosphere that transcends tourism or rational data. That intangible hush, the distant echo that might be fish or might be a monster's call, the fleeting glimpses of movement that set hearts racing, all conspire to sustain a living myth. Over time, the myth becomes part of the land's identity, weaving cryptozoology and local tradition into an inseparable tapestry. And so, the watchers continue. Each new generation tries fresh technologies, improved sonar, thermal drones, remote submersibles. Each generation emerges with the same tantalizing mixture of near hits and inconclusive glimpses. Meanwhile, the moon cycles overhead, its reflection shimmering on that wide expanse of water. The oak-scented wind rustles the pines. The hush intensifies, and perhaps from far below, a subtle ripple arises, hinting that we are not alone in our vigil. In that moment, you can almost hear the loch breathe, and you might sense, for just an instant, a presence sliding silently beneath the surface, as timeless and unfathomable as the highlands themselves.